as we work our way through the next
45 miles per hour, moving west at 13, and looking at satellite, you can't even find where Tropical Storm Kevin is right now. You might see a flare-up in thunderstorm Lesser Antilles as Hurricane Erika makes its way across the Atlantic. Hello, and thanks for joining us. I'm Kim Perez. Now, we're going to have your forecast in a minute, but first, let's talk about Hurricane Erika and the particulars here. This is the intermediate advisory that came out at 2 a.m. from a reconnaissance aircraft that has been flying around Hurricane Erika. And winds are now we're seeing an increase here. Winds are now at 80 miles per hour. That has come up, and pressure has come down here in the last couple of hours. It's now at 96 millibars, and it's about 125 miles. The center of Hurricane Erika is about 125 miles east-northeast of Antigua. It's 18.1 north, 60.1 west, and the movement has remained unchanged somewhat, west-northwest at 12 miles per hour. Now let's see how close we are taking this hurricane. Hurricane Erika, well, here it is, and here are the Lesser Antilles, the northern islands. Here are the Virgin Islands and also Puerto Rico. Hurricane warnings have been issued and have been out for a while now for St. Martin, to Antigua, including Montserrat, and also including Barbuda. Puerto Rico and the Virgin Islands are under hurricane watches at this time. And Dominica and Guadeloupe they're under tropical storm warnings. Now, what does this all mean? What does it mean when you're under a hurricane warning, for instance? Well, hurricane warning means that hurricane conditions are expected in the warning area in the next 24 hours or less. While a watch, this is tropical and hurricane, watch just means that those conditions are possible in the next 36 hours or so. So folks in Puerto Rico, folks in the Virgin Islands, nothing happening right now, but tomorrow morning, maybe tomorrow afternoon, you may be feeling some of the effects of Hurricane Erika at this time. So please just pay attention to the weather and keep us tuned in here at the Weather Channel, and we'll keep you updated on the most current information. And right now, looking at the infrared shot, we can see why it has intensified here. Now we're becoming more symmetrical, the central dense overcast, and we're seeing the reds now towards the center of the central dense overcast, and we're still continuing to see the outflow, decent outflow, and a few bands actually coming off, and some of the islands already feeling the effects of the tropical storm winds. Well, maybe not there yet, but getting close to it. And the hurricane force winds extend mainly off to the north and east of the center, which is good news because that means as this hurricane tracks off to the west-northwest, the western side of the storm has the weaker winds, and that's probably what will be affecting the islands. Now, if something changes, the track changes, it could be different. We could be seeing higher wind gusts or sustained winds if the center comes closer. But right now the track keeps the center away from the islands and recurves it. But this is always subject to change. We're pretty certain that's what's going to happen. But please tune in with us and we'll let you know if anything does change with the track of Hurricane Erika at this time. And you can see here in perspective where it is to the U.S. and to Cuba. And again, Puerto Rico, nice conditions there right now, but again, tomorrow it might be a different story. So how will this affect the U.S.? Well, right now the thinking is because of the way the upper level winds are, the upper air pattern, we have a trough here, and that should help keep Hurricane Erika away. If anything, it should help it to recurve a little bit to the northeast, but some of the models are indicating that the trough lifts a little bit and may allow Hurricane Erika to come a little bit closer. We'll let you know, but don't cancel any plans this weekend. Go out and enjoy yourself. Just keep us in the back of your mind, and we'll let you know what's happening with Hurricane Erika. And we'll have a full update here at 50 past the hour. Let's talk a little bit about the state.
6th, then I guess the top.
This early, probably traveling, trying to get to someplace. Marshall Cease and Rick Griffin watching Erika strengthen a little bit.
More concerned about Erika. We know a lot of folks are curious about the tropics, and after a very quiet August, September starting a little more stormy, and we do have a hurricane affecting the northeast part of the Caribbean, and also severe storms right here in Lincoln County in Nevada. Early in the morning, we have a severe thunderstorm warning just north of Las Vegas. So some action. That's also some cool, dry air to tell you about in some spots. So let's start with the tropics. The latest on Hurricane Erika, which is not anywhere near the continental United States at this point. But on down the road, what's going to happen? Well, we'll be trying to analyze that for you as the Saturday unfolds. 18.3 north, 60.6 west is the 5 a.m. position, 110 miles east of Antigua. Winds at 80, sustained, maximum. West-northwest at 12 is the movement, and the pressure, 986 millibars. Here's your colorized satellite picture. The center of Erika right under the central dense overcast. By the way, the reds are the highest cloud tops, coldest cloud tops, and the center, occasionally the eye of Erika, right here, about 100 miles east of the northeast islands in the Lesser Antilles, the Leeward or Leeward Islands, depending on how you want to pronounce it. The movement west-northwest. Latest computer charts indicate the high pressure north of Erika is weakening a bit. So the official forecast now swings the main part of the storm north of the northeast islands of the Caribbean. So the brunt of the hurricane probably will stay north of, say, Barbuda, Antigua, and St. Martin, out here in the open waters. But if there's just a little bit of a wobble, this part of the Caribbean could see a direct hit, some of the islands. So we're watching it very closely. Puerto Rico, you're seeing the subsidence, the sinking air out ahead of the hurricane. The skies this morning are almost perfectly clear. It's a very nice late summer morning in Puerto Rico, the Virgin Islands, and the Dominican Republic.
Weather Channel. No place on Earth has better weather.
This tropical update is brought to you by Lowe's Home Improvement Warehouse. When it comes to home improvement, Lowe's knows.
Thanks for joining us early on this Saturday morning. Here's the latest on Hurricane Erika, which is closing in on the Leeward Islands in the northeast Caribbean. The latest position is 18.3 north, 60.6 west. 110 miles northeast of Antigua, the island of Antigua, winds at 80, sustained, and the movement of Erika west-northwest at 12. That motion should continue for a while, and then the latest forecast charts have it curving a little bit more towards a northwesterly track with time. That might mean that the brunt of the hurricane will miss islands like St. Martin, Barbuda, and Antigua. That is certainly a possibility. 29.12, 986 millibars, the central pressure. Hurricane watch is in effect for the U.S. and British Virgin Islands and for you folks in Puerto Rico. And a watch means that hurricane conditions could develop within 36 hours. A hurricane warning, which now is posted from St. Martin to Antigua, means that hurricane conditions are expected in the warning area within a 24-hour time period. And in the case of tropical storm conditions, within 24 hours from Guadeloupe to Dominica. The wind field with Erika. Well, the hurricane force winds extend out about 105 miles from the center, mainly on the north side of the eye. Again, that is away from the islands in here. In fact, the worst conditions are north of the eye in this case. So if there's a little bit of a turn towards the northwest, the strongest of the winds, the worst of the hurricane conditions may stay out in the open waters here with a blustery north to northwesterly airflow across Barbuda and Antigua, for instance. You're very close to the tropical storm force winds right now. It's a deceptively quiet morning in Puerto Rico because you have the subsiding air out ahead of the hurricane, so it's clear. In Puerto Rico and the Virgin Islands are having a pretty good morning, but you notice just off to your east a veil of high clouds, the leading edge of the cloud cover in association with Hurricane Erika. Here are the islands of the northeast Caribbean. They're very difficult to pick out, but the center of Erika is in here, and the Hurricane Hunter, with its last pass through the center, just very recently has found an eye, closed eye wall, an indication that Erika is fairly well organized for a minimal hurricane. Again, the direction of movement, west-northwest. If it continues on that track, the brunt of the hurricane may skim north of the islands, but any wobble, the brunt of the hurricane will miss islands like St. Martin, Barbuda, and Antigua. That is certainly a possibility. 29.12, 986 millibars, the central pressure. Hurricane watch is in effect for the U.S. and British Virgin Islands and for you folks in Puerto Rico. And a watch means that hurricane conditions could develop within 36 hours. A hurricane warning, which now is posted from St. Martin to Antigua, means that hurricane conditions are expected in the warning area within a 24-hour time period. And in the case of tropical storm conditions, within 24 hours from Guadeloupe to Dominica. The wind field with Erika. Well, the hurricane force winds extend out about 105 miles from the center, mainly on the north side of the eye. Again, that is away from the islands in here. In fact, the worst conditions are north of the eye in this case. So if there's a little bit of a turn towards the northwest, the off to the west could mean a direct hit for some of the northeast islands of the Caribbean, the Lesser Antilles, the Leeward Islands. The big picture shows that Erika is just about the entire story in the Atlantic tropical scene right now, because all we have otherwise is a couple of weak tropical waves, nothing showing any signs of organization. Erika, once again, right here. The Eastern Caribbean, though, outside of Erika, in fine shape. Upper level low continues to spin. Storms in the Gulf. We're still watching the southwest Gulf of Mexico for developments there, but right now nothing of significance. Kevin's still out here. It's been downgraded a bit. Difficult to find. It's going to dissipate today, we think, out in the eastern Pacific.
WeatherScope is sponsored by Lens Crafters, helping people see better 1 hour at a time.
This is WeatherScope.
A stronger Hurricane Erika is approaching the eastern Caribbean this morning. The Leeward Islands will get strong winds, rain, and thunderstorms from the storm, but it is unlikely that they will take a direct hit. Good morning. I'm Marshall Cease. With details on this story, here's Rick Griffin in our forecast center.
Thanks, Marshall. Good morning. Well, Hurricane Erika is the top weather story this morning in the tropical South Atlantic. For those of you following the hurricane with us, we have the latest coordinates for you. If you're plotting it on your hurricane tracking chart, 18.7 north, 61 degrees west. That puts the center, the eye of Erika, 120 miles northeast of Antigua in the Leeward Islands. Max sustained winds are 80. There are higher gusts, and some strengthening could take place today, but as you'll see on the colorized satellite picture, Erika's looking a little more ragged than it has recently, a little less organized this morning. West-northwest, that is the movement of the storm, 12 miles per hour, the forward motion, and the pressure 986 millibars to 9.12 inches of mercury. For those of you in Guadalupe and Dominica, your tropical storm warnings had been dropped. However, hurricane warnings remain from Antigua to St. Martin. That hurricane warning area also includes Barbuda, St. Kitts, Montserrat, Anguilla, and the island of Nevis as well. Hurricane warning means that hurricane conditions are expected to develop in 24 hours or less, so batten down the hatches. Hurricane watch in effect for those of you in the British and U.S. Virgin Islands, as well as the island of Puerto Rico. And a watch means that conditions may develop within 36 hours. Based on the latest forecast track, that may not happen, but we urge you folks to stay with us, because any slight shift in the northwest track of Erika could mean a direct hit for some of the islands in the northeastern Caribbean. Here's your wind field. The hurricane force winds extend out 105 miles from the eye, north of the center. Tropical storm force winds as far as 200 miles from the center of circulation. Again, the worst part of the storm is north of the center of circulation. That is good news, because south of the eye there is less of a wind field. And if the west-northwest track continues, that means that the islands in the northeast Caribbean probably will not endure the brunt of Hurricane Erika. In fact, right now, the weather observation at Antigua, 120 miles away from the eye, is only just a light southwest breeze, less than 5 miles an hour, partly cloudy skies at St. Martin, a northeast breeze, partly cloudy conditions. And as you can probably see, it's a pretty nice morning in the U.S. and British Virgin Islands, and fair skies in Puerto Rico, as there is subsidence or sinking air out ahead of Erika. Now again, the latest colorized satellite shows less symmetry with the storm, a little bit of a breakup of the convection activity as compared to earlier. Again, as I mentioned, a little more of a ragged look, and that indicates that maybe Erika is going through some fluctuation in intensity right now. Again, the track, west-northwest, but with the high pressure, the subtropical high up here weakening, that may allow Erika to take a sharper right-hand turn with time. The forecast track takes the center to about 120 miles north of St. Thomas in the Virgin Islands by, that would be sometime a Sunday afternoon tomorrow. But again, if any wobble takes place to the west, that could mean a direct hit for some of you. We urge you to stay with us. But again, right now the official track takes it about in this direction, with the weakening of the subtropical high to the north, allowing Erika to steer more in a northwesterly direction. On down the road in the long range, the forecast now, for the most part, is for Erika to steer clear the continental United States. But once again, that forecast not etched in stone. We urge you to stay with us. And if there were any problems in the continental United States, it would not be until sometime the middle of next week.
Everyone, it's now, by the
Weather Channel. No place on Earth has better weather.
8:30 now before the hour. Time to take a look at our tropical update. And, of course, Hurricane Erika is stealing the headlines in the tropics, but so far so good. Not harming anybody at the present time. Now, our 11 a.m. advisory on Erika has the hurricane centered at 18.9 degrees north, 61.5 degrees west, or approximately 120 miles to the east-northeast of the island of St. Martin. Top sustained winds, though, have increased over the last observation, now up to 85 miles per hour. It continues to move in the same course, west-northwesterly, and about the same speed, 12 miles per hour. However, the Hurricane Center says in the next 24 hours we can expect perhaps a little more of a turn to the northwest and a little slowing of the forward progress of this storm. Now, the central pressure, 983 millibars, according to the latest reconnaissance reports. Now, we check the hurricane watches and warnings that are presently posted from Antigua to St. Martin. We still have hurricane warnings in effect right now. Hurricane watches from the U.S. Virgin Islands and Puerto Rico under a hurricane watch. Now, once again, with that progress, it's missing the islands. And not only is it missing the islands at the present time, the most intense winds associated with the hurricane are to the east and north of the center. So again, they're out away from the islands themselves. There you can see where the hurricane is centered. There are the hurricane force winds, mainly east and north of the center. Tropical storm force winds, fairly circular, although a little more favoring the northern sector. But still, some of the islands will be feeling the effects of this hurricane in the form of some 40-mile-an-hour winds or gustier. Now, here's a look at the infrared satellite picture. Now, this in and of itself doesn't look all that impressive as we watch it, but again, it's still holding together pretty good. It's sort of getting stretched a little bit. We can see a pretty big outflow well out to the north of this with the high to mid-level cloudiness. There's Puerto Rico looking okay for right now. Here's a different perspective now. Here is the visible satellite picture. There are the islands. There's Puerto Rico, and there is the center of Hurricane Erika continuing to swirl about. You see a pretty good little tail here from around Trinidad Tobago wrapping up inside the hurricane itself. Now, once again, it is not bothering the islands too much right now. It's getting a bit squally. And it is forecast to continue to move to the west-northwest, once again, away from the islands with the heaviest weather associated with the hurricane to the north and east of the islands. However, a slight jog to the left could put the islands and the U.S. Virgin Islands under hurricane conditions. So again, there's no problem now, but again, it doesn't take much to nudge this thing a little to the left and we could have a bit of a problem. Meanwhile, out to the tropical Atlantic, got a little tropical wave coming across here. Seems to be firing up a little bit. We'll keep an eye on that, but it's way out in the central Atlantic. In the Gulf, we have some thunderstorms associated with our stalled front. We'll be watching here towards the Bay of Campeche, some storms here that may flare up right now. So we'll continue to keep an eye on this situation for us. And Kevin is now a tropical depression. That's right, it's been downgraded. It's over cooler waters. The top wind's 35. It's anticipated it will begin to diminish and should dissipate a little later on today as it moves over the cooler waters of the ocean. So that's a look at the situation in the tropics right now. Well, continuous updates coming your way. Next, here's Cheryl.